Praise the Lord. Thank you, Jesus. You know, there's three things I was thinking about. I don't mean this to be funny, but it's true. What does a shampoo bottle, ketchup, and the gospel all have in common? They're all three things that have been watered down. It's the truth. You know what I'm talking about. We grew up poor. We made a shampoo bottle last. Come on now. You get about that much, you put a little water, shake it up. You're good for another week. Anybody else do it with ketchup? We've had watered down ketchup more than we've had the real stuff. Get to the place where you like the watery version more than you do the thick stuff. It's just too thick. We need to water this down. But you know, unfortunately, the gospel is something that has been watered down across our world today. And you know what? I hate to say it because we have such an awesome country, but as Americans, as American Christians, we are the chiefest of sinners in watering down the gospel of Jesus Christ. That's the truth, people. Today, I want to just talk about the simple gospel. And there's been some things that's been just going through my spirit this morning. I know looking back, as you leave today, you'll think, really wasn't just a great homily, but I want you to hear the content of what I'm saying this morning. When you play a game with your child, how many people you have intentionally let them win? 3 people? Stop smashing your children in the ground. Let them win a game occasionally. Some of you play basketball with your 3-year-old and you're up there just, no, the Kimby Matumbo. No. Not going to happen. Don't do that. You know, if you were alive this day, a little over 2,000 years ago, you would think that the devil had won. I want to tell you the story of the events that happened this week, a little over 2,000 years ago. Is that okay? Tell the story, but it's not a fable, it's the truth. It's what happened. Jesus had developed this incredible ministry, and we talked last week about how he was at the apex of his ministry when he comes into Jerusalem on Palm Sunday. Things couldn't have been any better. The crowd accepts him as the Messiah that's come. The crowd is yelling out 2 things, a prayer request. Hosanna, save us now. Salvation belongs to the Son of David. Blessed is he who comes in the name of the Lord. And we talked last week about how that's not really too far from where we are in the church today, how oftentimes our worship accompanies the answer of the prayer request that we're giving the Lord. And if he doesn't do what we want him, what we think he should do, the worship quickly fades. It took them a week. Unfortunately, there's times that it takes us a lot less for our cries of worship to cease. But in this week, his plan started becoming to unfold. His plan started unfolding to his disciples. There was one guy in particular named Judas who could not go there. One of the 12 disciples. There were thousands that was following Jesus. Multitudes of people following Jesus. He was one of the inner 12. They got to him. The priests got to him. They wanted Jesus taken out. They did not like him. First of all, how many people have been watching the Bible series on the History Channel? I've really been enjoying that. Have you? Looking forward to the fulfillment tonight. Watched every episode. I've really been impressed. I think it's been pretty well done. I was watching last week as the betrayal of Judas. I have to think about that. Jesus praying in a garden, and one of the 12 disciples that he had called close to him betrayed him for some silver, 30 pieces of silver. And they come in the garden, and it wouldn't be enough for him to just tell them where he was. He had to go himself. He led them there and betrayed him with a kiss. What betrayal! But that only started the intensity and the severity of what Jesus was about to experience those next few days. That night in the garden, Jesus was in such turmoil that he was sweating drops of blood. Sweating drops of blood. I've really entered into prayer before. That's an intense level of prayer I've never been to. Sweating drops of blood. They arrest him. And they take him to the high priest. And they try him and convict him as if he was some sort of felon. They persecute him and they prosecute him. They condemn him and they convict him. Now, what had Jesus done? Nothing. He came to fulfill the mission that the Father had bestowed upon his life. But see, if it only stopped at conviction or condemnation or persecution, but it didn't stop there. It started with betrayal of Judas, went into the condemnation, then came the torture of what Jesus went through that week. And I hate to say that we celebrate Good Friday, because thinking about what happened, I mean, we celebrate what Jesus accomplished. It was so intense. And it always rips my heart out of my chest when I see the severity of what Jesus went through and my unworthiness to receive it. Man, it's like this. I don't deserve what he did for me. But it started right there. Tied to a whipping post. And I know you know this story, but I want it to come alive in your mind, because I'm going to draw some paradoxes here in a moment. Let it come alive in your mind. Feel his pain this morning. Tied against a whipping post. Then came the brutal torture of the cat of nine tails. This rocks and things tied in this whip, as they raked across the back, it rips flesh from him. I can't get a paper cut without crying to my wife for about 3 days. It wasn't anything like that. It was unbearable, unimaginable pain. Unimaginable pain. Tied against a whipping post, with the flesh ripping from his skin with each stroke. 39 times. Imagine enduring it once. Imagine one stroke on your back. One stroke of a whip ripping flesh from you. Now, it wasn't just one stroke. It was 39 times that happened across Jesus' back. You should imagine at the end of that, there would be no flesh left. The muscle would be shredded like it was ran through a meat grinder. Jesus' mangled back. They mock him. They spit at him. They curse him. They rip his clothes off of him. And then in pure mockery and blasphemy, they take a crown of thorns and they jam it into his skull. Being blasphemous, calling him the king, when their heart was to ridicule him and to blaspheme him. Behold the King of the Jews! Jesus standing there with a mangled back, with a crown of thorns embedded in his skull. And then, oddly enough, what I just described, that's the easy part. Imagine one stroke across your back. 39 times. He endured it. Crown of thorns. That's the easy part. They put the cross on him. You ever wondered why did Jesus... He had to carry his own cross. They put it upon him, and he had to walk down the Via Dolorosa that day to Calvary. No wonder he fell and couldn't carry the cross. There were no muscles left on his back. No wonder he couldn't endure the weight of the cross. Put his cross upon him. And then comes Golgotha. Jesus is already at the point of death. He's already there. And then they nail him on a cross. And this doesn't even remotely. Can you imagine just the sting of accidentally stepping on a nail? Most people have done that. Might go about that deep. But I'm talking about piercing through the entire foot. Piercing through the entire hand. I'm not talking about a little prick. I'm talking about complete penetration through the hands and the feet. That's where he's at now. And then they erect the cross. All that's holding him is the nails that's gone through his body. And he's elevated while everyone else is making fun of him. And then his lungs start to collapse because he doesn't have the support in his chest cavity to even take a breath. See, that's how people die by crucifixion. Their lungs collapse because they can't take a breath. Jesus is up there all mangled. He's already there. And then he starts to lose his breath. He starts to get that death rattle because he can't breathe. While they stand there and ridicule him and mock him. They take his clothes off of him and they gamble for him. It's just a big party. You would think at that moment that the devil had won. You would think that it's over. That the devil had won. The King of Kings, hanging on a cross, bloody, empty, broken. You would think it's a sweeping victory for the enemy. That he has struck down Jesus and has triumphed over him. I want you to think for a moment, though. This was not an ordinary man. I want you to think for a moment about the paradoxes, the opposing truths that are going on at the same time. Jesus on a cross, he utters these words, I thirst. He says, I thirst. His flesh was feeling the need for water, for something to touch his palate. I'm not going to get into the reason why, but I want you to think about the paradox there. The very one who created water with the spoken word, who said, let there be water. And there it was, just because of the power, the creative power that came out of his mouth. Just because of that, water, there it is. Created everything like that. You and me, man, sun, stars. Wasn't he went to a workshop and got out his tools? He spoke it into existence. That's how awesome our Creator is. The very one that spoke it into existence now confines himself in humanity and is asking for a drink of it. That has hit me all week. The very one who spoke it is now asking for a drink of it. Could Jesus have said, let water come and fill me? Could have stuck his tongue out and just it would have came down from heaven. Jesus was not weak. Jesus intentionally subjected himself to weakness. It wasn't that the devil had won. The one who spoke water into existence is now asking for it. When he was on the cross, the sun went black and darkness came and surrounded. I want you to think about this. The light of the world is now surrounded by darkness. Jesus is the light of the world. Darkness didn't win that day. He intentionally subjected himself to that. The devil wasn't winning. We get in our head like there's some great tug-of-war going on, like it's God will win the first round, and here comes the devil. It's not even close. We need to get that out of our head, like the devil is real close to God's power. That's ridiculous. That's not the truth. God is almighty. There's no one like our God. But Jesus intentionally weakened and subjected himself to that. How many times had Jesus healed someone in his earthly ministry? We see blinded eyes. We see the mute speaking. We see the lame walking and leaping. We see the lepers healed. We even see the dead raised back to life. The great physician himself is writhing in agony and pain on a cross. He was the great physician. And as they say things like, "Oh, you're so great. Save yourself now and we'll believe." No, they wouldn't. No, they wouldn't. The great physician himself subjected himself to that torture and agony and pain. That's a paradox. Could Jesus have spoken the word and the muscles be mended on his back and body? Could he have spoken the word and the scars bleeding down his head from the crown of thorns just be healed up? Sure he could have. Could Jesus have spoken the word and those scars on his hands and feet just become like new? It would have taken one word. That's it. Jesus wasn't sitting there in weakness. He subjected himself to that. And I'm going to tell you why here in a minute. The creator of water asked for something to drink. The light of the world was surrounded by darkness. Jesus, the great physician, the healer, was beaten and writhing in pain on a cross. Here's another one. The friend that sticks closer than a brother was isolated and left alone to the point that he even cries out to his father, "My God, where are you? Why have you forsaken me?" See, Jesus is our omnipresent friend. He's the friend that the Bible talks about that sticks closer than a brother. But yet he was there on the cross all alone, empty and broken and forsaken. The Prince of Peace was in turmoil. It wasn't a matter of sure he could have had peace. He's the Prince of Peace. Jesus had all kinds of peace. He even said to his disciples, "Don't worry about it, guys. My peace I give to you. Not as the world gives you do I give you. My peace I give to you." Paul talks about it being a peace that passes all understanding. He was the Prince of Peace, but he subjected himself to turmoil. Jesus owned the cattle on 1,000 hill, but he was sitting there on a cross, even having his clothes robbed from him. I believe I'm in covenant relationship with God. He's Jehovah Jireh. He's our provider. We got promises we can claim from God. But Jesus was sitting there on the cross, naked, even having the clothes that he owned taken from him and gambled for. It's a paradox. All of these things, looking at it from the outside, you would think the devil had won. It's over. But much like a father allows his child to win, don't misunderstand me, the devil is not God's child. Jesus did it intentionally. It wasn't that the devil struck this blow and now the empire has to strike back. That's not what it's like at all. Jesus did it intentionally. Every lash could have been stopped with a word. Every pain could have been silenced with a word. Every bit of loneliness could have been stopped with a word. Everything he endured could have been stopped with a word. One word. But he endured it willingly. He endured it willingly. The devil had not won. The Lord suffered and went through it intentionally. Friday seemed like a good day for the enemy. But Sunday was coming. Something changed. on Sunday. Jesus there weak, empty, broken, alone, naked. It was about to change. And it would never go back again. Sunday was coming. See, when Sunday came, the devil was made a mockery of publicly. When Sunday come, the grave ended its reign of terror. When Sunday came, the Prince of Peace came bursting through the tomb. When Sunday came, loneliness ended forever because now we have Emmanuel, God with us. When Sunday came, darkness would bow its knee to the light of the world. When Sunday came, healing would be for everyone because sickness and disease would give up its hold because the great physician had come. Forgive my grammar, it's still true. See, when Sunday came, it was totally different. You would think the devil won on Friday, but Sunday was coming. Why now is the question. Why did he subject himself willingly? We see that it could have stopped with a word. We see it could have stopped anytime, any of those things. But never take for granted or mistake that each and every one of those things was done intentionally and strategically. And I'll tell you why. Keys. Just for the next 5 minutes, I want to talk about Jesus' key ring. First one, the Bible says in Revelations chapter 1, verse 18, that he now holds the keys to death and Hades. I don't know about you, but that stirs my spirit. He holds the keys to death and Hades. He holds keys to the grave now. When Sunday came. See the separation that we feel from each other when one of our loved ones goes on. See, Jesus has the key for that. When we move beyond this realm into the supernatural, into the eternal, it's not over. Because there's a key in his hand. Barbara, as your son went through that this week, that stroke, let me tell you something. Jesus is holding the key for that now. Yeah, there's a key in his hand. You might be here this morning and you're alone and empty. Jesus holds the key in his hand. Jesus has a key ring. And let me tell you something else. The same keys that he holds to all of those things, Jesus holds the key to your heart. I've always said this, that there is a key that unlocks the heart of every man. There's a God-shaped hole inside of you. And I can see on Easter Sunday this morning, there's a lot of people that have searched in a lot of different places trying to fill that hole. Let me tell you something that's true. Jesus is the end of your search. Don't waste the next decade of your life trying to fill it with something else, because that will end in misery and despair. You might think you're having fun along the way, but you're empty and broken and you don't even know it. Jesus holds the key to your heart. That same key holder that holds the keys to death, hell, and the grave, the key to your healing, the key to your peace, the key to your provision, the key to whatever. He holds the key to your heart. The problem is in life we get so cold and hard-hearted, and we try to block out everyone. We try to block out the world, knowing when we do it that we're hurting and empty. Call it giving them the Heisman. Here, Jesus, no. Some of you football fans, somebody, please laugh. Thank you, Trey. We try to block everybody out of our life, even knowing that we're hurting and miserable. Let me tell you this morning, here on Easter, the day that we're celebrating the victory that Jesus accomplished, there's not a better day than today for you to finally bow your knee and get over yourself. For you to admit your brokenness and your emptiness. There's not a better day for you to get to the end of your rope. There's not a better day to realize that what you're doing is not working and the end of it is death and destruction. There's not a better day. We could sit here and have an argument. Well, stay out of my business. I'm not in your business. I love you. I don't want to see a wasted life one more day. Jesus is the end of your search. The Bible says when you look for him with all your heart, that's where you'll find him. All of us are searchers. Let me tell you, my search ended when I found Jesus. Everybody's a seeker. They end up in different places. But when you find Jesus, it's the end of the search. Doesn't mean you'll never have problems again. But it means you've got a key holder who's with you that can unlock those things that you need in your life. See, I'm in covenant relationship with the key holder this morning. No matter what I go through, he's my answer. If I'm hurting, he's my answer. If I'm going through despair, he's my answer. He was chastised for my peace, and the seal of it was on Sunday when he raised from the dead. Whatever you're going through, run into his arms this morning. I see you got some folks that think, well, I don't want to be like that. This is a shame. We ought to be the living embodiment of Christ. We ought to be his hands and feet. But do you know a lot of times Christians are the main problem that turns people away from Jesus? We're doing a disservice to our Savior. We ought to look like him. We ought to smell like him. When people come in contact with us, like in the book of Acts, they need to say, something's different there. I can tell they've been with Jesus. But instead, that's not who we are. A lot. It's a broad stereotype. I don't mean it like that. But we ought to be who God's called us to be. Because there's a lot of locked up, cold hearts out there that need Jesus. And we ought to be willing to step up and say, I've got your answer. We ought to start caring about those people around us again. Because we see the price that he paid. Don't we? He endured it willingly. And then he made a public mockery of the enemy. Let's all stand to our feet this morning.